Again, I promise this is the last video. So now we're going to talk about SWOT analysis. I've actually introduced SWOT analysis before in our explanation to guidelines already, but we're going to look at it briefly now. So the SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is a very empirical analysis that allows companies to canvas what's happening, what are the potential threats and opportunities, what are the current weaknesses, and what are the current strengths. Now, so what is the strength of the company? It's an advantage. What other advantages do you have compared to your rivals? What do you do better than others? So strength is something relative. I mean, if you're doing something and providing this, for example, let's say that you do have a call center in your company. Can we say that it's a strength? Yes, if only other companies don't have it. Okay, this is something in comparison. But if other companies also, everyone has the same call center, then that's not particularly a strength. This is like a must-have now. So this is something that you actually do better than others. This is something unique. So what kind of advantages do you have over others? So this is your particular strength. Now, what is weakness? Weakness is something that you're not doing yet, what you could have done. Maybe you could improve it because customers are complaining about that, or simply you don't have, for example, the call center, others do have, and this is a weakness if you don't have it. What should you avoid? Maybe you're doing something that is far more complicated for customers. Customers are very nervous about that. They're very anxious about that, or even stressed about that. So this is obviously a weakness. So are there any things, any activities of your business that could be improved, and there is a lack and gap of your company and other rivals? So if there is a gap and a lack of thing and deficit of thing, this is obviously a weakness. Now, opportunities, they are usually based on strength. So if you do have some strength, and that means you are more advantageous compared to your rivals, you can actually use this edge to do something extra. So obviously, if you do have a call center and others don't, that means the opportunity would be that you can actually have, you can process and operate with more clients because others don't have the call center, you do have it. So that's an opportunity that you can actually get and grasp and cover the wider customer segments. Okay, what are the threats? The threats usually they also based on your weakness. So if you have something that you're not doing good enough, okay, then that means that in future it can actually do a bad thing for you. It can harm your company. It can harm your company's reputation. It can harm your customers' satisfaction, for example, or anything that is a threat. So threat is a particular obstacle, okay, that is usually based on your current weakness. Okay, let's take a look at Porter's 5. Now, I'm gonna also attach the video by Michael Porter discussing the Porter's 5, so I'm sure he can explain it much better than I am. But I'll briefly just introduce it here one by one. So, what is competitive rivalry? So, Michael Porter said that there are some 5 forces like competitive rivalry, supplier power, and so on that you have to be aware of and look at these forces' effect on you. Now, competitive rivalry. If your business has a lot of competition, that means that the force of competitive rivalry is strong on you, is strong on your company, because you just have a lot of competitors, okay? It's not weak, but it's a strong force on you. The supplier power, what does it mean? Let's say that you're producing plates, okay? And then obviously you're purchasing some supplies from your supplier. If you have lots of suppliers available, okay, that means that if your current supplier says, well, sorry, I will have to increase my prices, you'll easily say, it doesn't work for me, I'm going to switch to another supplier. So to what extent it is easy for you to switch from a current supplier to another supplier. So if you do have a variety of suppliers you can choose from, that means that the supplier power on you is weak. The bargaining power of a supplier on you is weak. But if you have only one supplier and you cannot live and operate and continue your existence without this supplier, that means that this supplier's power on you is absolutely strong. The buyer power. Now, what is the buyer power? The buyer power is very closely associated with the switching costs from you to your competitor by your customer. Now, let's say that you do have a boutique, okay, of clothing in Mega Silkway, okay. Let's say it's Zara, okay. Now, are you the only clothing boutique here? Is it easy for a customer to switch from you and go to another one? If it's absolutely easy and takes only several steps, that means that the buyer power on you is strong, because the switching cost from you to another potential competitor is minimal. That means if the switching cost between you and your competitor is minimal for your customer, that means that the buyer power on you is strong. Okay? Threat of substitute. Now, threat of substitute, it's about not your product. It's not your product. Let's say I'm selling perfumes. Okay, I'm selling perfumes. Now, your business produces perfumes. Are there any substitutes of perfumes? Yes. If you're talking about other perfumes, they are going to be your competitors. We're not going to talk about competitors. Substitute is not a perfume. This is something different from the perfume, but may be used to the same purpose. Maybe it can be some soaps with some smell and fragrance and so on. So how much easy, to what extent it's easy to substitute your product? If it's very easy to substitute your product, then the threat of substitute is strong on you. But if you're very unique and it's very, very difficult to substitute you, it's only your product that actually enables customers to get what they want, then that means that the threat of substitute is weak. Finally, threat of new entry is very closely related with the barriers of entry. Now, if you're a coffee shop, it only takes 2 or 3 million tenges, even less sometimes, 2 or 3 million tenges for anyone. You don't have to be qualified. You don't have to have a degree in coffee shop making, okay? It's just quite straightforward. The budget to start a particular business is low. The qualifications are low. The barriers to entry this particular business is low. If it's low, then the threat of new entry is high and strong. But if you are, for example, a company that produces crafts, okay, that is very difficult to start. That is extremely difficult to start because you will need to have a lot of budget and, even more importantly, a lot of accumulated knowledge and expertise in your company. It's not always about money, but it's also about accumulated experience and expertise and qualifications. Okay, so these are the examples. This is the McDonald's case. Please look at this McDonald's case in your own time. Now I'm going to talk about business model canvas. So let me jump directly to the business model canvas. It looks like this. Now it contains 9 boxes. Yes, it's 9 boxes. So the starting point is customer segments. When you start your business model canvas, there is a certain order, okay, of doing it. And the first starting point is going to be the customer segments. You know that. You can segment your customers based on their age, based on their preferences, based on their geography, level of income, and so on, other criteria. So first of all, you have to divide up your customers into classes, into clusters and segments. Then the next thing would be the value proposition. Now, this is kind of a value proposition canvas, isn't it? So the value proposition canvas is actually a part of this business model canvas. So if you have already done your business model value proposition canvas, you can actually use this value proposition canvas in this case and just use the particular exactly the same content. What comes next? The next thing would be the customer relationship. Now, how do you approach your customer? If you are, for example, if you are, let's say you're Kinopark. Okay, let's say you're Kinopark. How do you communicate with your customers? You can communicate with your customers, for example, using your offline like services. Well, you do have cinemas, right? And people come and buy there. They can ask questions. Another one, you do have a website where your customers can actually see and get acquainted with all the movies available there. You may actually also have some Instagram page where your customers will also have an access to your particular activities or have an access to some fancy and some beneficial things for your customers. And so what are the customer relationships? How do you build up your customer relationship? This is quite important. And in your business, you have to think about how do you actually communicate with your customers? What are the channels of communication? Now, I've used the word channel very carefully because there is another thing which is called channels. Now, this channel is not about channels of communication, but channels of sales. Now, if you continue the example with Kinopark, for example, what are the channels of sales for the Kinopark? Now, there are different ways of buying the ticket of Kinopark. The first one is you can buy it online using the website, Kinopark. You can use Ticketon, I guess, if I'm not mistaken. You can use the cashier points. Okay, so there are at least 3 channels of sales. Okay, so if you have more, you can also lay them out and actually provide. So the more channels of sales you have, the better for your business, because different customers, they will prefer different channels of sales. Now, so the first one is customer segment, value proposition, customer relationship, channels, key activities. What do you do? What kind of key activities you do? Now, obviously, if we still continue with Kinopark business, what they do, they actually buy the right from whoever, okay, I don't know, whoever, to actually broadcast and show these movies, right? So they actually, and this is the key activity. Without this activity, they cannot do their business. The next one, obviously, they will actually set up the cinemas. They will set up the cinemas and keep those operations, the sales, the cleaning, all these things, the scheduling stuff and so on. So all these things are the key activities, and obviously the sales are also the key activities. Key resources. What do you need to keep your key activities? What kind of resources do you need and demand as a company to actually continue and do your key activities? Well, in this case, the key activity, they obviously need a place to broadcast. They will need these setups in equipment. They will need all these staff and employees. They will need these websites. They will need these Ticketon services, etc. So I think you got it. So these are the key resources that they actually need to have and deliver the key activities. Who are the key partners? The key partners are going to be those companies, for example, which provide these rights. They do sell the rights of broadcasting these movies. The key partners, surely the Mega Silkway itself, Han Shatir, for example, itself, the landlords, let's call them the landlord. Well, actually, those companies that provide the rent, they're going to be the key partners, and maybe there are some other companies which who they need, who are the key partners. Now, sometimes the key partners and key resources can be the same. For example, Ticketon can be the key partner and key resource at the same time. So the Ticketon service is going to be the key resource, and Ticketon company itself would be the key partner. Now, what is the cost structure? In this case, you have to think about the fixed costs and variable costs. You have to say, these are my fixed costs, blah, 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 blah. These are my variable costs, blah, 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 blah. What are your revenue streams? How do you earn money? Now, earning the money in the Kinopark case, it's very straightforward. You just buy a ticket per person per film, right? Per movie. So that's going to be your revenue stream. It's going to be like per unit sales. But if you're, for example, Netflix, okay, or Megogo, then in this case, your revenue stream will be based both on, well, in Megogo case at least, you can actually sell per movie, as well as you can actually sell a subscription with a certain package where you can watch different movies for free, or it's actually included and covering within the subscription. So there are different ways of earning the money, and you have to show what are the sources of your revenue. Good. Here I've laid out the Kazunaiga's case, the business model canvas. You can actually get acquainted with that on your own time. That's it. So hopefully it was clear. This is our reference list. Good luck with that. We're going to be available via Zoom. And be safe.